Is anybody in this room not vaccinated? Does anyone freak out if we couldn't wear masks right now? Okay.
We are live now?
We're live, period.
But now, thank you. Thank you. Great timing. Okay, I'm going to call to order the October 14th Governors and Personnel Committee of the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority. We have with us in person today is Board Member Crystal, Mayor Younger, and on virtual is Chairman McKay. Is he in with us already?
We don't see him yet.
I think he is to be coming in. Okay, and Chair Wheeler could not attend today. Council Member Snyder, who is a non-GPC member, is also going to be joining us today, probably in a little while. Oh, there he is right there. There he is right here. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we do have two sets of minutes to approve because one set of minutes, we didn't have a quorum when they were approved last time, so to go back and do it this time. It is the July 8th meeting of which I was not at. Vice Chair Snyder actually chaired that meeting at that time, but I am going to ask the members who were there on the July 8th meeting, if you look over your minutes, is there a motion to approve? So moved. So moved by Board Member Crystal and seconded by Mayor Younger. Is there discussion on the motion? All in favor, please say aye. Opposed? And I will abstain, so that motion will pass 2-1-2 with board member, committee member rather McKay and committee member Wheeler not being in for the meeting. Actually, that doesn't pass a motion. It's 2-1-2. It ties a motion. The tie motion does not pass. Let's hold that. Let's just hold that.
You can check with the council. The council.
The tie motion doesn't
Subject
pass.
case.
Typically, a tag motion does not pass.
Thank you. I know about it. But since it was, the tie was an abstention, that's the question. It was an abstention.
Yes.
That still doesn't pass. I'll just wait on that one too, so somebody else comes online. But we can't go on and go, Yep. We can't go on and go to the September 9th meeting, which I was here, as everyone looked over those minutes. Is there a motion to approve? Motion to approve by Ms. Younger. Is there a second? Seconded by Ms. Crystal.
Second.
Okay. Discussion on that motion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion will pass 3-2 with Mr. McKay not being on yet and Ms. Wheeler not being with us this evening. Welcome, Councilmember Snyder, to the GPC meeting. Happy to have you here.
Thank you so much.
And have I not been recording all this time? I have been recording all this time? No, I have not been recording. I got to do all that again.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. It wasn't that big of a deal. It was only one thing. Everything did pass anyway. So let's go back and do it again.
We have one broadcast on YouTube though, isn't it?
Yes, it is on YouTube.
So we got the YouTube recording.
Do I need to do it again? I'm happy to do it again. How about this? Let me do it again. Because we don't need to have any drama, right? Okay. So for the Thursday, September 9th, Governance Personnel Committee, committee meeting. If you've read your notes, do I have a motion to approve the notes? Move to approve by Mayor Younger, seconded by Councilman Crystal. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. I'm sorry.
Any opposed? Aye. That motion passed 3-0-2. Come on, ladies. Come on. We're coming. You are. Okay. What we're going to do now is have a discussion about the legislative program that is coming up this new session, which will start in January.
Yes.
Okay. And Ms. Baynard, as you're giving us this presentation, what happens on November 2nd will obviously impact a whole lot of things. And for NVTA, it could impact transportation projects, budgets, things like that. Some of the budgets, of course, are long-term CFP, so it wouldn't really bother them as much. Some of the other ones, it really could. It would be helpful to know if there is a different tact we should take, or something different we should do, depending on how the election swings in November. I'd like to know that just so that we know we're ready. Of course, we know the things we've been working on for forever. I know the things that are very, very important to me, as does every other GPC member. However, I do think it's important for us to be prepared for any eventuality which could happen. So as you go through that, if there's something you think we should know, just make us aware.
Okay, I will. And probably, to be honest, more than our just November and December discussions of words post session, because I think it's all of these topics I think will still be discussed in 2022. Just a matter of their priority may switch.
Yeah, but by November, December, we'll know.
We'll know who our governor is, and we may even have some idea.
The general simply think of.
General something make up, and we may even know who our Secretary of Transportation may be.
Yeah.
Okay. So I thought I would go over 4 of the topics that we discussed at our last meeting. I'll come back with you, providing more the additional detail you asked. So I'll start with just probably the easiest one, which is the electric vehicle rebate program. I'm happy to say that the items that the committee was concerned about to make sure they were in the program actually are in the program as the bill passed in the General
So
Assembly.
that is that no matter how old the car, if it's a used car, you buy it, just to
Within a parameter. So, for example, there is a $2,000 bump up if you are at 300% of the federal median income. So there's a rebate of $2,500 for everybody, Virginia citizen. And if you are at 300% of the federal median income, there's an additional $2,000 added to that. So your rebate would be $4,500.
Wait.
You get more money if you're 300% above.
Thank you, yeah.
No, not 300% above. 300% or less of the current poverty guidelines.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. That's
Very
Yes, sorry.
More rebates
The
for
richer you are, you
Yeah,
save more
yeah.
money. Okay, that's a lot better. Okay.
So they are actually would get a $4,500 rebate.
Okay.
And it doesn't matter whether it's a new car or used, so that's covered.
Okay.
It covers for purchase or lease.
Okay.
It covers new cars of value no more than $55,000
Okay.
and used. Well, actually, there's an infographic that is in your packet that was, as part of the packet that was mailed to you, there's an infographic that was prepared. And the infographic shows the range of price of different electric vehicles. So you can kind of see where these
Like
numbers
a
are.
Tesla versus a.
Versus the Leaf,
Yeah.
for example. There you go.
Both of these screens.
It's kind of a range. And then
Yeah,
for a used vehicle, it's a used vehicle no newer than 2 years, no older than 5 years, with a maximum price of $25,000.
No matter the mileage.
No matter, they did not use a mileage criteria. They used a year criteria.
So all that would be excluded, just for the record, is the Mercedes-Benz, the Jaguar, the Tesla, and the BMW. Everything else would be included because those 4 electric cars are over the price range of $55,000.
Correct.
Okay. I understand. And the lease
Those
is
4.
right there, okay.
And there's a link.
It's like what we maybe have for buying used versions of someday.
So,
Someday.
right. So really the biggest, not surprising, the biggest barrier to actually having a workable program is money. They passed the bill in 2021, but did not fund it. My understanding is the funding request that has gone to the governor for advocates for this program is $40 million. I don't know how many families or people they think they could assist with that, but that's the number we're at least asking for is 40 million. So my proposal is we would have a policy supporting this, the $40 million, but we would restate the parts that get to the equity question to make sure that they stay in the program. The bump up for the low income families, that is purchase and lease, that it's new and used.
All these, yes, I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, does it make sense to say we, in our legislative package, that we support the 40 million, or would we want to be more generic and say something like fully fund?
Well, actually, I would do fully funded. I would say we might get lucky. And say fully funded.
Excuse me, does that include the charging station?
No, this is just for the purchase of the vehicle. There's gonna, okay, back to the whole issue of who gets elected and what their priorities might be. Well, there will be some effort to direct some money towards, some additional public money towards electric charging infrastructure. How that program will roll out, it's not yet clear, but they've spent what they had programmed for this from the Volkswagen settlement. But there are, for all of us to remember, there's still about $1 billion worth of rescue plan money that has not been allocated. And VDOT had
Does
requested,
the ARPA money to come in like next May?
yeah.
Okay.
And VDOT had requested for the special $50 million. It didn't, for charging infrastructure. It didn't get into the governor's budget, but I suspect that they will make a similar size request for 2022.
Is that person?
Sure. When all the agencies were asked to submit ideas for how to spend the rescue plan money for the special session they had in August, VDOT had asked for $50 million to help roll out additional EV charging station infrastructure. It did not make it into the governor's budget that was proposed. And I think part of it was there's not a specific strategy that's been put in place. They're working on that now. I suspect this is something put for CTV by the end of the year. So I suspect that they will once again make a similar request for rescue plan money for electric charge stations. And if we get lucky, the infrastructure bill will pass by then.
Which now goes back to what I just said before. Depending on who is in office,
How important that
how
would be.
important that would be. Well, yeah,
Yeah, that's right. I think that, yes.
Do we know what the state is even thinking about with regard to what, because electric charging infrastructure for individual personal vehicles, I mean, the state, municipal governments have never played a role in that. We don't operate gas stations, right? We were talking about this last month. And so do we know what VDOT is even thinking? I mean,
I
would it
don't,
be
that's-
public-private partnerships? Would it be
Yes.
public buildings?
Yes, yes,
All of the above.
all of the above. I think that's what they're trying to get their arms around. There certainly are a number of states have adopted some policies, so they're looking at those.
Sure.
And to get, you take the best from others and use it for yourself. I can almost guarantee that there'll be a look at public-private partnerships, whether, for example, they issued an RFP for companies to compete to use the Volkswagen money.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
I suspect that will be part of it. I actually do hope that there's a look at coming to local governments and asking you all who are already thinking about this also. Many of you I know are thinking about putting charging stations on your own properties that might be available to the public. So and that's another avenue that could be used to roll out.
We have to put it in our comp plan. And we just had a transportation summit. It was a very good discussion. The whole discussion of government leading by example, and not ever asking businesses or companies to do things that the government hasn't done yet. So.
But there's also the moral hazard, and stop me if I made this point in the context of NVTA. We have folks proposing to build commercial buildings that have maybe less EV charging than the market is going to demand, because there's sort of this understanding, well, people can access chargers at municipal buildings. It's a little bit, and then this question of like, what is the pricing, right? So I think I would love to see the state lead on this and work with us.
I think they want to. So I think that's what they're trying to figure out. And it's sort of a mixture of, because the transportation sector is thinking about it, and the Department of Environmental Quality is thinking about it, and then the State Corporation Commission is charged thinking about it to make sure that the grid can support all of this. So it's really a multi-agency, multi-authority discussion that's happening within the Commonwealth right now.
So I have to wonder, even if this was successful legislation to fund EV charging infrastructure was successful in 2022, we're probably talking about a year or more of just promulgating the guidance, right, from VDOT.
I think more than that, yeah.
For the charging stations or for the
Charging stations.
Yeah.
Because it looks like some thought has actually been done in the vehicle.
Right. Yeah.
And also notice that the vehicles are not of these are the hybrid vehicles.
No, it's very specific to electric
So
battery,
only.
electric battery vehicles.
Yeah.
And this is a finite program. It expires, I don't remember the date, 2027, maybe? Because again, they're trying to jumpstart the market. Yeah, trying to jumpstart the market. So we would be, and the other thing to remember is we'll be talking about electrification in reference to our transportation technology strategic plan, which we're adding overall to our quality, but this would definitely be a 2022 priority for us to.
This is one of the things that you can't have the infrastructure lagging too far behind when you do this. This doesn't make any sense.
People will buy the
People won't buy the vehicles. Exactly.
Right, and it's definitely one of the statements that the public will make when they're asked about these.
Right, when we're gonna charge this.
Where we're gonna charge, and there's gonna be a whole separate discussion about putting charging stations at people's homes.
And maybe a discussion would be, and I have no idea what this answer is, what state is doing it already and doing it well?
California.
Yeah, New Jersey just got adopted a plan, Tennessee's adopted a plan. There are a number of states who have strategic plans that they've adopted that are, and again, it's all connected. It's the EV rollout with charging stations, with what government's gonna do. Many of them couched in economic development terms, for example. So
Yeah.
there's definitely experiences out there that can be looked at.
What is the economic development terms they're couching in versus the environment?
So well, there's that, but for
Yeah.
definitely that, but for a lot of states, they're looking at job creation because you've got to build, operate, maintain these charging stations. Some of these states are vehicle manufacturing states where their manufacturers have already told them by X date, you will be an all EV model company. Virginia has a Volvo truck plant in Pulaski, I believe it is, which is in that direction. They're going to be all electric. So in that sense, it becomes economic development in that perspective.
Okay, thank you.
So again, we will be creating a section on the transportation technology strategic plan. And we will be, again, for 2022, emphasizing electric vehicles and electric vehicle infrastructure as an implementation point. And again, most of it because we know the state is discussing it, and it is something that could continue to be as much of a priority, depending on how the election moves forward. We also had a discussion about some attachment of updating the Washington Metropolitan, the WMATA section, both state and federal, take out the governance piece and insert language that really pushes, hey, federal government, you need to step up on operating, not just capital.
David, did you hear this? Customer side, did you hear this? We've been talking about this for a long time. We have.
So
Listen to us.
So the
That
section,
happens, huh?
Listen to you. I don't listen to
so the section has been revised to reflect that for sure. The other piece that came to you all as a additional topic is as the open meeting discussion at the FOIA Council. And this is a long time coming. You all remember we've chimed in on this as it related to what was going on during the pandemic and during a state of emergency. Our request to have that made permanent for state of emergency adopted in law in the 2021 session. As we discussed here, there continued to be interest in figuring out what could be the next stage. Could you get all the stakeholders together, make them happy? Amy Seibert's been a great resource for me to understand how this all works. And it looks,
It's such an interesting discussion because I always want it to be an option, right, for obvious
Right.
reasons. I also want somebody to mandate that at least twice a year I get to see everybody in person.
Well, this does that. I mean, I have to say, I read this with such enthusiasm, and then I got to the final point about 2 times or 25%, and it's sort of
it's a
rendering
step.
all of this.
It's a step.
I know, but I mean, we gotta.
It needs to be the opposite. It needs to be flipped.
Exactly, and what it needs to do is empower these entities to make decisions for themselves. And I think the challenge that I have is not, should the NVTA always have the presumption of being a person? That is a given, absolutely. Should subcommittees of the NVTA. A better example, should subcommittees of the Virginia Railway Express, whose governance board spans literally dozens and hundreds of miles, have to get together every time they need to review their CEO in person, right? And then the biggest issue, and I don't know if this is a pain point for others in other jurisdictions, is that we have locally appointed commissions and advisory bodies who are desperate to have this ability to convene their meetings virtually because they actually find that it increases participation and increases the number of people who can serve on these commissions. And I know, I mean, this is just really disappointing.
Well,
And this is the different types of people who are able to serve.
Absolutely, absolutely.
so I completely understand, but I am actually surprised they got this far, to be honest about it, really. Yeah, because the open government and the media people have pushed back on this so much.
Which is Amy's client, so, yeah.
Yeah, but they're comfortable enough saying, well, it's preferred to be in person. There's this flexibility for everybody, not so many exemptions. It's easier to understand. Experience will allow us to keep pushing this. The world did not go crazy during the pandemic. We all realized that. We all realized there was these great benefits to being able to hold our meetings, not only to get work done, but as board member Crystal said, there was greater participation from the general public.
The mental health therapist in me though also knows that people need to see people and have those. So that's why I'm saying it should be flipped, right? So if it's said
Oh, I
that-
see, you require at least 2 meetings to be in person.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Oh, you mandate that.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
So you would mandate how many
Sure.
in-person meetings you
You
have.
got it. You got it. That makes more sense.
You know, honestly, having spent some time sort of watching the sausage get made, I would even just have a preference to define different bodies differently, but I understand there's no appetite for VCOG and the Press Association because they want to be able to follow one common set of rules.
Well,
But
and
it's,
well, the question though is, so for association, they can't follow meetings if the meetings are online? They can't follow virtual?
No,
meetings?
that was,
I have listened to their testimony at the committee meetings, and I think what they would say is that greater access to elected officials is provided to them, afforded to them by in-person
That's
meetings.
probably true.
I.e. they can buttonhole this afternoon. But here's the thing, again, yes, I think that is completely appropriate for
That's
elected
true.
officials.
Yeah.
I think for appointed officials, it really
I
ought to be
agree.
different, and I'm
Yeah.
frustrated that there's no opportunity to
Yeah.
move forward in that regard.
well, discussions are going to continue. This still hasn't gone to the full FOIA council, and of course, there will be legislation and there'll still be opportunities during the
Have
session.
they gone, chimed in on this?
They were part of the stakeholder group that worked on this, and so they're, again, the sausage being made is more than what was said. Some of the changes reflect positions that they wanted to have. They tend to get a little concerned. They tend to get more concerned, actually, I think, if you were to mandate, like the criteria piece, if you were to have an all virtual meeting, they were very sensitive to what that would be for some local governments who might not be able to afford or have a quality enough virtual platform.
And these criteria are burdensome in that regard. I mean, and again, I'm happy to take them, right? If we could have more meetings this way, but yeah, I mean, I think we can assume that this is there are not going to be a lot of jurisdictions, if you're talking about at the local level, within the Commonwealth who can participate. I mean, the live broadcast, a phone number that's available for people to call in if the live broadcast goes down. The recording. Yeah, I mean, I think probably the Northern Virginia jurisdictions are maybe better positioned than most, right? Maybe in the roads.
Absolutely.
To
Absolutely.
do this. Yeah.
Southern Virginia, maybe, yeah. So it's,
Well, I think for purposes of our legislative agenda, I would love, we've talked about this in the NVTC context too. I would love for us to continue to say that we support
greater flexibility.
maximum number of meetings, right?
Okay.
Because I don't want, we talked about this at NVTC, I don't want anything in our agenda to be understood as, well, NVTA supports just 2 meetings a year because it's better than nothing. I mean, if the
Or
compromise.
25%, so it would be 3 or 4,
Yeah,
I count 25% of 11.
But we're saying the opposite.
No, you would
Well, I
not.
don't think anybody's gonna accept the opposite.
But yeah, but what I'm a little worried about the maximum number, that means every single one of them.
Oh, fair enough.
So I'm gonna do that either.
Yeah, so, but I'm gonna, or maybe even just maximum authority for the public bodies to set their own policies,
That's
right?
That makes
What I
sense.
just worry about is that we could be misinterpreted to support, if there's any room to push this further, I think we'd be remiss if somebody used NVTA's position as justification to not push it Does that make sense? So however the language can be written to really say, the more flexibility you can give public bodies to set their own rules, again, consistent with these requirements, the better. And if this is truly all we can get this session, then,
Yeah. So I was gonna say, your cameras have to be on.
and you may not face your house.
Okay.
Exactly. Can't be doing dishes.
So that's very helpful. So I can write language that seeks the maximum flexibility within criteria, but allowing the bodies to understand. Do you want me to also talk about, I don't know how to say, I'm going to say advisory? Do you want to go that far?
Yeah.
I think that's actually really important. That's I think maybe a more important
Appointed versus elected.
piece. Absolutely, because of what Member Crystal said. So you're in a meeting and you're an elected official. You're going to be, someone's going to come up to you, the press, while you're on break or while and they should, right? And they should. We're elected officials. We're supposed to answer to the public. But somebody who's appointed to the CSB board, right? It's not the same thing. So I actually think that's a really good point, that elected bodies and advisory bodies are two different.
And it's somewhat germane to NVTA specifically, right? Because we do have appointed bodies. I mean,
Yes, we do,
Yeah.
especially when we have two statutorily mandated committees, the technical, which advisory committee, which is citizen-based, and then the planning coordination advisory committee, which is elected officials, but they're appointed by the, your governing body.
Right.
for the citizen-based one in particular. So I do think it might be worth our trying to further that.
Citizen-based one might be something else there too. Citizen-based.
Again, that may be a non-starter because VCOG and the Press Association wants standardization across all the appointed bodies, which I can see their point of that. But if there's a compromise that includes that, let's push for it. I think as NVTA as well as our individual jurisdictions.
I agree with that.
Heard that out.
I agree with that, and I will take that to make sure that we speak to this more freely in the relative agenda in Love
Yes,
County.
yeah, I think she would be what we're-
Yeah. And then the authority and liaisons are getting together later this month, so we'll talk about this and there's some language.
That's a smart, nerdy group right there. I'm sure you are.
We are very nerdy, right?
Owning
it. All your folks and me, I'm just saying. So, again, we haven't gotten any of the results yet from some of the key studies that we're following. But I do know that the JLR transportation funding study will be presented to the commission on November 8th. I have no idea what JLR staff is going to say about transportation funding, since we just adopted the omnibus bill, but okay. But I'm, again, really looking forward to looking at any recommendations on the trail piece. Because again, I also think that's another, depending on who gets elected, an opportunity for new money to be identified that would be available for competitive grants for local governments. Certainly what the region may decide as next steps coming out of the Springfield to Quantico Enhanced Public Transportation Study, that'll be released in December. What was the other one that I thought was trails for sure. And then there's an interim report from the Transit Equity and Modernization Study. Again, whether there have any recommendations in that for the interim study is still a little unclear. Now, overall, I think our legislative policy would allow us to comment in any way on all of those, but certainly what we are going to be collectively looking for, based on what your conversation was last month, is one, make sure it doesn't hamper anything that we're already doing in the region. Two, because of the nature of what I would call the Greater Washington regional activity you all are active in, again, make sure that it's not going to interfere with what you all are committing to on that front. And as always, be sure Northern Virginia can get its share.
Assumed.
Always assume that that's part of it. And I continue to comb the code and the budget and the Constitution to find if there's a specific way we can make it harder to defer our money. And so far, everything I've found is requiring a constitutional amendment.
I think Chair Randall is ready to go carry the banner.
I really, I.
She'll not force
I
for it.
so am. You're completely correct. We have new lobbyists, at the county level, and when they sit down today and talk to them for the first time, they're like, what are your prayers? I was like, well, let's tell you about the NVTA funds. Well, why isn't it an issue for me? So, no, I mean, every time I sit at the finance meeting and I, Mr. Long, he gives our balance sheet, I get nervous, like, oh, spend it. So it's not looking like there's money there, even though the money is walked, it's not been programmed out and all this type of stuff. Yeah, and it's because it's this kind of blasé attitude of not only can we take it, but if they want it back, they can retax themselves, right? That is my concern. So you see nothing there yet.
No, I mean, there's been some language in the budget that requires multiple committees to sign off, but it's in the budget. Technically, it's only there for 2 years, unless they remember to keep putting it in the budget. There was
Did multiple committees sign up last time?
no, not for us, like for other, I'm looking for
Oh.
examples of where they have
Okay,
done something for other somethings. Like, is there precedent for,
is there precedent for this, for what happened to us?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah, that's the thing, they do that all the time.
to that degree?
Depends on who you talk to, it's all relative to where you're sitting from.
Okay, all right, well, keep looking.
Yeah, I don't know, I have a lot. The last time they looked at something like this, there was a period during, you probably remember this, Mr. Snyder. Probably the 5 or 6 years before 2013 and our bill, 2313, there was an effort to put a lockbox around the state's transportation trust fund. But they were all attempts to do a constitutional amendment. And it would have required usually looking for a supermajority vote. If you were diverting dedicated transportation revenues to non-transportation uses, and you had to pay it back with interest, depending on which bill you're looking at 4 to 5 years or 3 to 4 years.
Oh,
But they were all constitutional amendments, and none of them. I'm not sure. I think maybe one got to the floor.
okay.
I guess that makes sense because when we talk about this locally, that there's such a hesitance to take any action that would bind future general assemblies.
There's also such a hesitancy to take any action that actually says we have to raise taxes,
Well, sure,
right?
that's a political hesitancy.
Versus we're gonna take these people's money and then they get to raise taxes.
Well, we would have to
Again.
be authorized to raise taxes again by then.
Again.
They're not gonna be authorized to that, so.
Again, so, yeah.
I mean, so far we've received state funds to help fill our gap, but only via because the state has raised taxes, and they were getting more money coming in anyway.
Well, no, but didn't we do something more?
No, we did,
Yeah,
but like, to
Okay.
be perfectly honest, the 81 money was through fees and tax
Yeah,
increases.
yeah.
And the money we're getting out of the
Maybe
Commonwealth
one
Transportation
never
Fund
came
was,
to be what we thought it was gonna be anyway.
well, yes, that's why the money.
There is that.
There is that, that's why the number is 38.5 million, and not something long, shorter than that.
Yep,
So,
okay.
so that's how I have.
Oh, no, I'm saying.
Yeah, so that's all I have for this. So when I come back to you in November, it'll be in a single document. I'll be highlighting the new sections and where we changed. There's a lot of new language we're gonna have on things. And I'll also, so we have the bigger document, and we're also gonna have what's probably looking like 3 or 4 key priorities for, just specifically for the 2022 session. Protecting electrification, EVs. Hopefully.
And Madam Chair, I'm sorry, because Erica has me on a tight deadline for this picture at 6:30, and you do have another item.
Well, I was actually gonna ask you guys, do you want to do, since we are a committee of 3, do we want to do this closed session right now? Because I think it's kind of important that the whole GPC.
Is the full authority going to be discussing this item?
Not tonight. Not tonight.
And we do have,
Mr. McKay.
Did Mr. McKay join us?
no,
No.
Sure, Randall, the only impact on that is we will obviously be the CEO's performance.
and I know Mr. McKay will not be at the November meeting either.
okay.
He did notify, or Chairman McCash.
Okay, all right, well, I'm going to. Yep, and Yeah, we're gonna do it. All right,
You do have the 3 fast members.
we absolutely do. That's why we're here. Okay, so I'm gonna read this into closed session and make the following motion. I move the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority Governance and Personnel Committee convene a closed meeting as authorized by Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711.a.1 for purpose of discussing a personnel matter specifically to address the CEO's position description, compensation analysis report to the extent it pertains to the CEO's 2020 performance review. That is the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is made second by Board Member Crystal. Discussion on the motion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 302 at 6:17.
We have to turn off the recording.